may not always love you.
The 1960s gave us some of the most iconic songs in history. Anthems of peace, love, and rebellion that shaped an entire generation. But behind the melodies that comforted millions lurk shadows most fans never knew existed. These weren't just songs. They were born out of pain, betrayal, secret affairs, government investigations, and even brushes with death. The golden era of music was darker than anyone dared to admit. Tonight, we're peeling back the curtain on 10 classic 60s hits and the chilling secrets buried beneath their timeless sound. Number 10, God Only Knows by the Beach Boys.
I may not always love you.
When you hear God Only Knows by the Beach Boys, it feels like pure beauty. Lush harmonies, tender words, and one of the most perfect love songs ever recorded. But behind that angelic sound lies a story of risk, controversy, and the fragile state of Brian Wilson's mind in 1966.
But God only knows what I'd be without you. God only knows.
Wilson took a bold gamble writing the song. Using the phrase, God only knows, in a pop lyric was nearly unthinkable at the time. Radio programmers whispered that it was blasphemous, and some stations even refused to play it. Tony Asher, Wilson's co-writer, later recalled, "We knew we were walking on dangerous ground, but Brian wanted honesty no matter the risk." But the deeper secret is how personal it was. By 1966, Brian Wilson was unraveling under the pressures of fame, drugs, and his own perfectionism. Rumors circulated that the orchestral recording sessions stretched late into the night because Wilson kept obsessively reworking every note, chasing something almost divine. It felt like Brian wasn't writing a song. He was trying to capture heaven itself. And the irony. For all its beauty, the song is drenched in melancholy. If you should ever leave me, life would still go on, believe me.
If you should ever leave me, life would still go on.
It's not a celebration of love, but a fragile plea born of insecurity and fear of loss. Some insiders whispered that Wilson's crumbling mental state seeped into every chord, every harmony, making the song as much about fragility as devotion. Even Paul McCartney, who later called it the greatest song ever written, seemed to recognize the bittersweet edge beneath its beauty. So when you hear it today, remember, beneath the heavenly harmonies lies a darker truth.
God only knows what I'd be without.
Number 9, Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones. When you hear Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones, it doesn't just sound like a song, it sounds like the end of an era. Released in 1969, it captured the sense of dread that hung over the final days of the 60s. War, assassinations, riots. This wasn't flower power anymore, it was chaos. Keith Richards wrote the haunting riff while staying at a friend's London flat, listening to storm clouds gather outside. He later admitted, "You can't always put it into words, but there was this feeling in the air, like the whole world was coming apart." But it's Mick Jagger's performance, and especially Mary Clayton's legendary guest vocal, that pushed the track into myth. Clayton was called into the studio in the middle of the night, heavily pregnant, wearing curlers and pajamas. She nailed the line, "Rape, murder, it's just a shot away" in one blistering take. Rumor has it the intensity was so great that she miscarried later that night. Whether coincidence or consequence, the story became one of rock's darkest legends. And then there's Altamont. Only months after the song's release, the Stones headlined the infamous Free concert where violence broke out, and Meredith Hunter was killed right in front of the stage. For many, Gimme Shelter became the soundtrack to that nightmare, a song that eerily predicted the darkness to come. Jagger himself later admitted, "That's a kind of end-of-the-world song. It's apocalypse." The darkest secret of Gimme Shelter isn't just in its lyrics, it's that the song became reality. What began as music about fear and chaos ended up echoing through one of the bloodiest, most haunting moments in rock history. Number 8, He Hit Me and It Felt Like a Kiss by the Crystals.
He hit me, and it felt like a kiss.
He Hit Me and It Felt Like a Kiss hit the airwaves in 1962. It caused immediate shockwaves. On the surface, it was a silky sweet pop tune, perfectly polished under Phil Spector's legendary wall of sound. But behind the harmonies lay one of the darkest, most disturbing stories in 60s pop. Written by Carole King and Jerry Goffin, the song was inspired by singer Little Eva's real-life relationship. She confided that her boyfriend's abuse was, to her, a twisted form of love.
I told him I had been untrue.
As Goffin reportedly said at the time, she believed that's how love was shown to her, and we captured that honesty in the song. Even the recording was chilling. Phil Spector's production made the vocals sweet and almost angelic, which contrasted terrifyingly with the lyrics. He hit me and it felt like a kiss. Some insiders whispered that Spector intentionally kept the tone deceptively cheerful, amplifying the song's discomfort and controversy. Radio stations immediately balked, pulling it off the airwaves. Newspapers labeled it morally offensive, while feminist writers decried it as romanticizing abuse. He Hit Me didn't just challenge the conventions of pop. It forced listeners to confront a disturbing reality hidden behind innocence and harmony. Its beauty is haunting because it's a song that makes you pause, a reminder that sometimes the darkest truths hide beneath the brightest surfaces.
He hit me, and I knew he loved me.
Number 7, The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel.
Because a vision softly creeping.
When you hear The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel, it feels like stepping into a dream. Gentle voices, poetic words, and a sense of timeless mystery. But behind its quiet beauty lies a story of loneliness, betrayal, and one of the strangest accidents in 1960s music. Paul Simon wrote the song in the bathroom of his childhood home, literally locking himself away with the lights off to capture what he later called the sound of silence. He confessed years later, "I was just a kid, 21, writing about isolation. I didn't know it would speak to the whole world."
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
The lyrics, "Hello, darkness, my old friend," weren't abstract poetry. They were Simon's private confession of alienation in a decade bursting with noise. The song first appeared on their 1964 debut album, but it flopped. Simon and Garfunkel actually broke up, believing their career was over. Then came the twist. Columbia producer Tom Wilson secretly remixed the track, overdubbing electric guitar, bass, and drums, without even telling the duo. And then there's the haunting timing. By late 1965, The Sound of Silence was number 1. Right as America was spiraling deeper into the Vietnam War and reeling from the Kennedy assassination.
Silence like a cancer grows.
Many listeners swore the song felt prophetic, a soundtrack for grief and a warning about a society losing its way. Garfunkel himself once called it a song that rose out of the ashes of America's turbulence. So the darkest secret of The Sound of Silence is that it wasn't meant to be a protest anthem at all. It was a reminder that sometimes the quietest songs carry the heaviest weight.
Of silence.
Number 6, Like a Rolling Stone by Bob Dylan.
Once upon a time, you dressed so fine, through the bumps of dime in your prime.
When Bob Dylan unleashed Like a Rolling Stone in 1965, it wasn't just a song, it was a revolution. But behind its genius lies a web of bitterness, betrayal, and controversy that made it one of the most dangerous singles ever to hit the radio.
Like a rolling stone.
The song began as a scrawled poem, Dylan's raw venting during a moment of personal collapse. He later admitted, "I had never thought about writing a song like that. It just came out of me." Insiders whispered that the rage was aimed at a former lover, possibly socialite Edie Sedgwick or even Joan Baez, women who Dylan had tangled with and discarded.
Ah, you gone to the finest school, all right, Miss Lonely, but you know you only used to get.
Dylan never confirmed, but his venom was unmistakable. Lines like, "How does it feel to be on your own?" felt less like lyrics and more like daggers.
How does it feel to be on your own?
But there's another layer. Dylan himself was on the edge of breakdown. He was exhausted from touring, burnt out on fame, and growing disillusioned with his role as folks' prophet. The recording session itself was chaos. Early takes fell apart until a young Al Cooper, who wasn't even supposed to be in the studio, snuck onto the Hammond organ and added that now iconic swirl. Dylan loved it. That accident helped give the song its haunting edge, and when Columbia released it, radio stations balked. 6 minutes? Too long, too angry, too unpolished. But the song wouldn't die. Kids demanded it, DJs spun it against orders, and suddenly Dylan wasn't the folk messiah anymore. He was the voice of rock rebellion. The darkest secret of Like a Rolling Stone is that its power came from venom and despair. It was Dylan's middle finger to everyone: lovers, critics, fans, even himself. And in doing so, he didn't just write a song, he lit the fuse that blew open the 1960s.
How does it feel to be on your own?
Number 5. The House of the Rising Sun by the Animals.
There is a house in New Orleans.
When you hear House of the Rising Sun by the Animals, it feels like stepping into a shadowy world where sin, despair, and regret echo through every note.
Sold my new blue jeans.
Released in 1964, it wasn't just another British invasion hit, it was a centuries-old ghost story, reborn for a new generation. The song itself has mysterious origins. Some historians trace it back to the 18th century England, others to the American South. Was the Rising Sun a real brothel in New Orleans? A women's prison? Or just a metaphor for temptation? Nobody knows for sure. Eric Burdon later said, "We didn't know where it came from. It was just one of those songs that felt older than time." But it was the Animals version that turned this folk ballad into a dark anthem. Recorded in one electrifying take, Alan Price's swirling organ and Burdon's haunted voice gave the song its power. Yet even within the band, rumors swirled. Price alone was credited on the single, leading to bitter feuds and accusations that he'd claimed royalties that should have been shared. The song that made the Animals famous also tore them apart, and then there's the darker interpretation. The lyrics, "Oh mother, tell your children not to do what I have done," aren't just about gambling or drinking. Many scholars argue the song is really about addiction and destruction, a warning from someone whose life has been devoured.
They call the rising sun.
Burdon himself leaned into that darkness on stage, often delivering it like a confession rather than a performance. Even Bob Dylan, who recorded the song before the Animals, admitted their version eclipsed his own. He once said it was a song that seemed to come from nowhere, but could belong to anyone who's ever lost themselves. So the darkest secret of House of the Rising Sun is that it isn't just a song, it's a curse passed down through generations. Number 4. California Dreamin' by the Mamas and the Papas.
All the leaves are brown, and the sky is gray.
When you hear California Dreamin' by the Mamas and the Papas, it feels like sunshine and freedom. But the reality behind the music was anything but bright. The song wasn't born in California. It was written in the freezing streets of New York City, during a winter that left Michelle Phillips depressed and homesick. John Phillips later confessed, Michelle was miserable. She wanted to go home to California. That longing is what gave the song its soul. All the leaves are brown and the sky is gray isn't just poetic, it's raw, almost painful honesty. Listeners heard a beautiful melody, but behind it was Michelle's very real struggle with isolation and despair. And then the scandal behind the scenes. Michelle was still married to John, yet rumors swirled of an affair with bandmate Denny Doherty. Some insiders whispered that John threatened to kick her out of the band, but the magic of her voice kept her there. Those sweet harmonies on the recording, they were born from tension, jealousy, and heartbreak, a perfect disguise for the chaos behind the music. The California dream itself was a double-edged sword. Thousands flocked west hoping for freedom, sun, and love, but reality was often harsher. Poverty, drugs, and shattered dreams lurked behind the golden facade. Michelle later admitted, "We sang about paradise, but living it was something else entirely." And here's the chilling part. Some fans and historians whisper that the song almost foreshadowed the darker side of the 60s. The Manson murders, the collapse of the counterculture. A song about longing and hope became, in hindsight, a haunting prophecy. So next time you hear California Dreamin', listen closely. Beneath the soaring harmonies lies longing, scandal, and the bittersweet truth that paradise is often just out of reach. Number 3, Louie Louie by the Kingsmen. When you hear Louie Louie by the Kingsmen, it sounds like sloppy teenage garage rock. Raw, chaotic, almost falling apart. But behind that sloppy sound lies one of the strangest, darkest legends in rock history. The FBI's War on a 3-chord song. Recorded in 1963 in a single take, the band stumbled through the track with offbeat drums and singer Jack Ely practically swallowing the microphone. The result? Nobody could understand the lyrics, and that's where the trouble began. Parents across America claimed the song was obscene, filled with hidden sexual messages. One Indiana governor even called it pornographic. The FBI actually launched a 31-month investigation into the song, combing through slowed-down recordings and even interviewing the band. Their final report admitted they found nothing, but by then, the myth had taken on a life of its own. Ely himself laughed about it years later. "I couldn't even understand the words, and I was the one singing them." But the song's darkness wasn't just in the controversy. The real lyrics, originally written by Richard Berry in 1955, told a melancholy story about a sailor longing for his faraway lover. What began as a tender ballad became, in the Kingsmen's hands, a wild, drunken-sounding anthem of frustration and desire. That's exactly why teenagers connected with it. It sounded dangerous, forbidden, even if no one knew what it meant. And the cruelest twist? Despite sparking one of the most notorious scandals in rock history, the Kingsmen barely profited. Mismanagement, lawsuits, and disputes over royalties left them fighting for scraps, while their song became immortal. So the darkest secret of Louie Louie isn't whether it was dirty. It's that a sloppy garage recording exposed just how much fear one little rock and roll anthem could cause in 1960s America. Number 2, Help by the Beatles. When you hear Help by the Beatles, it's easy to imagine a bright, catchy 1965 hit. Upbeat, sing-along, and seemingly effortless. But behind that pop perfection lies one of John Lennon's most vulnerable moments, a glimpse into the psychological strain beneath the Fab Four's charming exterior. Lennon himself admitted years later, "I was at the end of my rope when I wrote that. I wasn't asking for help. It was me screaming for help." Beneath the jangly guitars and harmonies, the song was a raw confession of anxiety, exhaustion, and the crushing pressures of fame. By 1965, Beatlemania had engulfed the band, and Lennon felt trapped in a whirlwind he couldn't control. Rumors swirled among insiders that Lennon often broke down between takes in the studio, confiding in producer George Martin about sleepless nights, paranoia, and the constant media scrutiny. While Paul McCartney later described it as a fun pop song, those close to John knew it was more than music. It was therapy, encoded in a melody that millions sang without realizing its weight. Even the upbeat delivery is deceptive. The song's urgency, the rapid-fire lyrics, the tense guitar rhythm, all hint at panic and vulnerability. Some engineers on the session later remarked that John's voice carried an unusual strain, as if he were almost pleading, not performing. It was a cry into the void, a young man revealing the cracks beneath a global image of joy and coolness. It became a hit, yes, but it also stands as one of the Beatles' most honest windows into the human cost of sudden fame, showing that even legends sometimes scream in silence. And at number 1, The End by The Doors.
This is the end, my only friend.
When you hear The End by The Doors, it feels like a hypnotic journey. But behind its 12-minute haze of organ and whispering vocals lies one of the darkest corners of 60s rock.
Have you seen the accident?
Jim Morrison wasn't just singing, he was exposing the shadows in his own mind. The song began as a simple breakup track, but in the studio, Morrison transformed it into something far more unsettling. Legend has it that during the recording, he improvised lines that terrified the band and caused engineer Bruce Botnick to freeze in shock. Ray Manzarek later confessed, "We weren't sure if Jim was joking or losing it. It was terrifying and mesmerizing at the same time."
He put his boots on. He took a face from the ancient gallery.
Rumors abound that Morrison's fascination with death, violence, and the taboo fueled the song. Some insiders claimed he would arrive at the studio in a trance-like state, muttering cryptic lines about life, death, and destiny. His improvised screams and whispered vocals were glimpses into his psychological spiral. And the darkness didn't stop in the studio. Live performances of The End became infamous for Morrison's unpredictable behavior, collapsing on stage, delivering his Oedipal monologues directly to the audience, sometimes so intense that police or venue staff would intervene. Some fans say Morrison saw The End as a kind of prophecy, a personal confrontation with his mortality. Within 4 years, he would be dead at 27, and the song's eerie, unfinished quality feels almost prophetic in retrospect. So next time you listen to The End, pay attention. It's not just a psychedelic epic, it's Morrison's confession, a window into obsession, trauma, and the raw, unfiltered darkness that pulsed beneath the 60s. And there you have it, the songs you thought you knew, stripped of their shine to reveal the shadows lurking underneath. The 1960s may have been the decade of peace and love, but its music tells a different story, one of obsession, tragedy, scandal, and secrets hidden in plain sight. Maybe that's why these tracks still haunt us today, because behind every chorus lies a truth too raw to ignore. So next time you hum along to one of these classics, ask yourself, what other secrets might be hiding in the songs we've carried with us for a lifetime?